Hello and welcome. Season 5, Episode 10 of Dualistic Unity. I am speaking without quite so much intention. And I'm realizing as I'm saying that without quite so much intention, maybe a double negative in there, kind of confusing myself and not going to try and figure it out. So, you know what I mean. And just enjoying the relaxation that comes with not having so much of an intention behind the way that I act, the things that I say, the things that I do. And excited to share that experience today.
And it's funny because without an intention to get somewhere, you're just left with the intention of what to be. Without a why, it really just comes down to choice. You can literally be intent on the present. And in that, your experience changes based on the intensity of your presence, in fact. And so that becomes its own path to nowhere, oddly enough, but it does change everything. And so I find myself now surrounded by people, quote unquote, that are letting go, that are finding they are exactly what they need to be and allowing that to change so that they can experience what that is and witness what might be possible. It's inspiring. I'm having a great time. This is going to be a fun episode. Today, we are joined by a longtime community member, friend, supporter, retreat goer, and all around awesome person, Susan Hannan. Thank you so much for being here, Susan. We've often seen you in our Patreon groups on Discord. You've always been here for us, for the community, and we hope that you feel welcome all the time. Before I go any further, I do want to mention that you have been on the show before, earlier in the series. I believe it was one of the roundtables. It might have been in the first series of 10 roundtables. I'm not entirely sure. Do go and check it out. It was with Melissa. So there was a lot of discussion about psychology and counseling and therapy and stuff like that. Great conversation. I have no idea where today is going to go. And so I'm just going to pass it over to you and let you take the ball wherever you damn well please.
Thanks so much, Ray. And thank you both for having me on again. I really enjoyed the first roundtable I was on. So excited to see where this goes. Yeah, this, like you said, has been a community that I've been a part of pretty close to the beginning. I think I found dualistic unity, as I think most people do, by Andrew's TikTok. I've tried to remember what the content of that first TikTok was that really hit home for me. And for the life of me, I can't remember. And so I've let that go. But I just remember whatever you were saying, I was like, yes, like I want more of that. And that was at a time in my life where I think I was still very much like grasping onto concepts and intellectualizing things. And so I was just trying to consume as much information as possible. So on the TikTok, you mentioned the podcast, started listening to the podcast, and that very first episode, it's so hard to explain, but something just hit differently. And I think it was just the, I guess, casual way that you both were talking about these insights. So just a little bit of history about myself. I work as an assistant professor of psychology, but also as a clinical psychologist. And so some of the therapies that I'm trained in have roots, I guess, in Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism. And so I was familiar with concepts like no self, emptiness, what we call in one particular therapy, which is called acceptance and commitment therapy. There's this concept called cognitive diffusion. It sounds fancy, but it's really just like you're not your thoughts, diffusing from your thoughts. And it's so funny because I would talk about these things with patients, and I would try to practice it on myself. But I swear it wasn't until I heard that first episode where I was like, oh, like I'm literally not my thoughts. Like that's not me. And it just like opened up this whole other door. And then I don't know if I ever told you this, Andrew. I doubt you're going to remember this, but I DM'd you on Instagram because also what really, I think, shocked me, for lack of a better word, when I first heard both you and Ray talking was like how clearly and concisely you were talking about these what at the time I would call psychological principles. And like, I hadn't even heard other therapists talk about these principles or these concepts so clearly. And so that just really stood out to me. And so I DM'd you, Andrew, on Instagram, just saying like, thank you, blah, 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 blah. And you sent me a voice message back. And I remember I was so excited that you sent me this voice message. And I was like, oh, like, cool, what, like a down-to-earth guy. And then like in the middle, as you were talking, you let out this huge yawn. And then you were just like, oh, sorry. And I was like, oh, this guy doesn't give a fuck. Like, that is awesome. Like, he's not trying to put on a show. Like, he just is who he is. And that, I don't know, I guess that just kind of got the ball rolling. And then I joined the Patreon groups and started going to retreats, and here we are. That is
Quite the timing for how I've been feeling recently, but I appreciate you sharing all of that. It's funny because that was actually, because I always, and this is another fucking story I tell myself, is like, oh, I'm bad with DMs. And really it's just, I fucking conceptualize it into this big thing and think about everything at once. And then it's really just, getting back to a DM here and there is just what it is, like that, in that spot. It's not this fucking collection of things. And so a lot of times I'll box it up, get overwhelmed by it, and then just fucking avoid it. And that's the tactic for handling it. But during that time, I was like, it was one of the bouts where I was like, I should get back to a bunch of DMs, and instead of typing, because like I don't like just typing in general when on the phone, I was like, fuck, I'll just do voice notes. So I think I spent a morning and sent out like as many as I could during that time. And so I'm glad, very happy one of them came across you. But it's funny that you bring up that's what hit, was like the mentality. It really wasn't the words. It's like, yeah, there's a component. You mentioned other things you've come across with me and Ray and our videos and whatnot, but really what finally made it was that just seeing us relaxed talking about this, like, not really, like, it's saying the same stuff. A lot of people are saying a lot of words, and you even heard a lot of words. You heard a lot of words like there is no self, things like that. And so it of course it's the mentality that's being brought across, because I've heard these words. You hear the words all the time. You hear all the fucking words all the time. Everyone's hearing the words all the time. And it's never been about the words ever. And the words become an expression of a given mentality, relaxation, of not trying to get them across in a specific way, because you're not, talking to anyone else.
This is true with all of our relationships. It's true in parenting. It's true with our romantic relationships, our friendships. The more you're focused on the words, the more manipulative you tend to be, right? That's when you start to recognize that love and friendship and all of that is more than just a word. It really is more of a feeling of connection rather than anything else. And so if that's the point, then that's the point, which means it starts with you and your feeling of connection to yourself. And what's funny is that people get caught up in trying to feel connected to everyone else, not recognizing that intention in itself is divisive. It creates another person to connect to. And so there's a gap immediately. And the more you want to close that gap, the bigger it gets. And isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's so funny. And that, like, just kind of looking back, like, to that past mentality or mentalities I've been in, and I was so focused on the words and focused on getting it. Like, I really wanted to get Buddhism. And before that, growing up, I was raised Roman Catholic. And so, from the very beginning, I think that in and of itself teaches division, right? It teaches you are this kind of little separate entity, and there is this God, this being that is greater than you. And at least in the church that I was brought up in, it's like you have to follow these rules in order to go to heaven, right? In order to have that eternal peace and happiness. And I can laugh about it now, but when I was a kid, I was so scared. And I grew up in so much fear, and I didn't even really recognize it until I'm in this more relaxed state right now. I think, though, as I got older, I was never one, like, I think, Andrew, you've talked about this before because you went to a Christian or a Catholic school, right? And you were one to question things a lot. I was never one to speak up. I would have described myself, or the story that I told myself as a child was that I was very shy and I didn't really have a voice. So I wouldn't say that I questioned things, but there was always this voice inside of me, like, this doesn't make sense. Like, this is weird. Just walking up in church on Sunday and, just eating the body and drinking the blood of a dead guy. Like, now I think about that and I'm like, what the fuck? That's so culty. And yet as a kid, you don't know. But I wasn't very vocal in my questioning of it. I just remember being very scared and not wanting to burn in hell for eternity. Right. So I, tried to follow those 10 commandments or whatever, even though I didn't. So then it's this dissonance of well, fuck, I broke this rule. Does this mean I'm going to hell forever? But I feel like I'm a good person. So I don't know. So yeah. So then I think also then the more I got into just higher education, that's when I really started to question it more. This does not make sense. The church that I belonged to took the Bible literally. And so, yeah, so I guess I distanced myself from that, but then I was still searching for something, right? Searching for something outside of myself, because it feels like that's kind of what I was taught to do, or the story that I told myself my whole life. So then I turned more, I would say, to Buddhism, and then searching for that enlightenment, right? Searching for that state where you're just peaceful and Zen all the time. Yeah, and I now I'm don't know why I'm talking about this, how we got on this tangent, but oh yeah, going back to the words, right? So that's what I was doing when I was reading about Buddhism and engaged in some of these therapies that have some Buddhist principle. I was just getting so caught on the concepts, even though the words are this is just a word, don't take this seriously. I'm but I have to figure it out. And then you get to the point where it's oh, there's actually nothing to figure out at all. It's a stripping away, if you will.
That's right. Yeah, it's funny because we really want the words to be significant, because then we can twist them however we like. I can't tell you how often I've heard a Christian or an ex-Christian tell me that when they're talking about the Son of God, they're talking about the Son, because they sound the same, right? Son and Son sounds the same. It's right, but they weren't speaking the same language. You understand those are English words, and time has changed, and they didn't always sound the same. It doesn't mean they that's very convenient, or they'll tell you, that English is a way of casting spells, because it's spelling. And it's oh, for fuck's sakes. And the whole thing, though, is that the words have such importance, and it's because I put such importance on them. And so if I put all the importance on the words, if I put all the responsibility on the words, then I am also a victim to those words. I can be swayed by them, influenced and manipulated. And now I have a shit ton of fear. And there's all of that fun stuff that goes with it. And then looking beyond the words, you're left with what? The silence of self-responsibility, right? And that's what people are trying to avoid. We don't want to be left with ourselves. And yet that's where we find ourselves at the end of the night. Right? When we're sitting up by ourselves, unable to sleep because we're worried about tomorrow. Right? There's that silence of who we are. And that's what we're supposed to be dealing with. Right? It's our relationship with ourselves. And so I always find it funny that the words are almost irrelevant. They're fun and they're useful tools, like all concepts, but they are built upon something that, if the foundation isn't there, the words become meaningless, or worse, they become toxic. Right? And yet when the foundation is there, and by foundation I mean just presence, without want, without desire, without lack, just being where you are, well, then all of a sudden the words become tools to express what you are, rather than what you're trying to be, or what you want somebody else to perceive you as. So the words can be dangerous, or they can be a lot of fun.
It's they're almost always a direct reflection of how you're seeing yourself. Are the words a product of you recognize that you're just talking to yourself, or are they a product of you trying to convince yourself that there is something else, that there is someone else? I think Ray said, I'm going to see if I can remember the quote, but it's, we try and convince something to someone else, which is really just our own process of convincing ourselves that there is someone else. And so what you were saying, Susan, with our desire to, get to enlightenment or striving to like figure it out, it's almost us in process of wanting to be something besides us. Like it's my intent to find something outside of me, for there to be anything outside of me. And so we can spend our whole life striving for that answer, for that thing, for that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, not realizing that it's just an avoidance tactic, just another avoidance tactic. And when you sit, it's like chasing that carrot, sit down, swings back towards you. When you stop trying to, you finally see what it is.
It's so interesting. So at the very first retreat that I went to, which was one on Vancouver Island, I had so much fear going into that retreat. And it wasn't necessarily about meeting people I hadn't met in person for a long time or being in a social setting. I'm pretty good with that, or at least that's the story that I'm telling myself. The story that was creating the fear was like, oh, like I'm dropping my idea of Susan, and it needs to be this big, like tumultuous event. And there was just, so much fear around, like, it's just me. It's not Susan, but it's just me sitting on uncertainty. I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I'm fine. Like, that is truly what I took away from that very first retreat. And then I also realized, like, oh, all that fear ahead of time was completely self-created. I told myself I needed to go through this huge dark cave, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I didn't have to do that. It's fine that I did. There's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, it is so funny how we're always just running away from ourselves. And I have what I now find kind of like funny story about language. It has to do with my most recent ego trip or side quest, whatever you want to call it. And it's so funny because I was really embarrassed about this when I came to this recognition a couple of weeks ago. And so it's just, I'm laughing that I'm now talking about it on a podcast, but here we are. So I had got caught up in this mindset for I don't even know how long, it's been a while, guys, months, where some of my thoughts were ego, like bad thoughts. Some of my other thoughts were like my higher self. So I had like good thoughts and bad thoughts. And I'm trying to think of an example of a bad thought. Like if any kind of fear came up, fear feeling or fear thoughts, it's like I had to act opposite of that. Like the fear was bad and wrong. That was the ego thought. And the thought was like, oh, you need to overcome that. You need to act opposite of that. That was my higher self. And I had been doing this for months. And I was laying on my couch a couple of weeks ago, and like this just wave of realization washed over me. Like, Susan, what the fuck have you been doing? Because the relaxed state, mindset, whatever I'm in right now, it's not completely unfamiliar. I have been in this mindset before. There was just more Susan before. There's less Susan now, whatever. And maybe that's the story. I don't know. That's my experience right now. But yeah, I just was like, it kind of dawned on me what I had been doing. And I went from like being so embarrassed to being like, how long have I been doing this for? To then being like, well, it's all just now. So it's a stupid question. And then feeling embarrassed and then being like, who's embarrassed? There's no one there to be embarrassed. I was like vacillating back and forth, but it's so funny how you can pick it right back up. So I bought into the embarrassment and that I needed to do something about it. And so I actually texted both of you that night. I strategically texted Andrew first because I was like, I know this motherfucker's not going to get back to me for days, so I don't have to like interact like right away. And so I texted you, and I ended up texting Ray later that night. And he's like, yeah, those side quests get weird sometime. And I was like, they sure fucking do. So yeah, that's been my latest adventure of psychotic Susan.
I just want to say that I love how you unpacked that, not just the insight itself, but then the immediate rebound to another fucking quagmire. And then, oh, hold up. And that's the benefit, right? Is that you catch yourself and then you catch yourself and then you catch yourself. And then when you don't catch yourself, you catch yourself not catching yourself. And it's just, it becomes this self-refining process. Now I'm going to pass it over to Andrew because I know he had a realization that was very similar at the Colorado retreat.
Yeah, really attaching to this idea that there's a right way, like there's a right, and that, like, that goes in so many scales, like a right way. Like, I want there to be a right way that is fucking separate from me, and immediately fucking all the consequences come into play as soon as there is a correct, as soon as there is a right, as soon as there is a right. I had it fucking with this conversation. There's a right way to experience it. There's out of the infinite perspectives, there's one that you're recognizing that you're the whole, and then you're speaking from the whole as if you're not always being that, doing that, and how quickly we conceptualize this and then attach to that and thinking, holy fuck, I went through like a week of, and the culminations fascinate me. Like the culmination, the build up before the release of like for me recently, it was trying to explain it the best way possible, the clearest way possible, the most succinct way possible, the most efficient way possible. And I straight up, like, I brought this up. I'll bring it up again. I think you already heard it on a Patreon call, Susan, but with that interview, and you saw it with a girl, Kate Max, super nice girl, does interviews while running around Manhattan. I had this fucking build up, and it's so funny looking back how much it was an intention that I had, like thinking about that. And as absurd as like just holding on to, and not absurd, I know I can be tough on myself, but like the desire to the desire to get it across in a way, I came to a fucking call with the question, only question on my notebook. How do you get this across the clearest? How do you get this across the clearest? That was my question going in to ask Ray. I think it was a Patreon call. And that was all I had written down. And like that I was so fixated on that. And then it was very soon after followed by the recognition that it's not words. It's not about the words. There's no one else to convince. There's no one else to get it besides you. And the desire, like, as you're talking to someone trying to help them get it, you're not getting it. And that is fucked. But it's also so freeing in a sense. Like there's the desire for someone else to think in any other way than they already are is in the way. It gets in the way immediately. You being you is them being them. You being you is the best thing for you, for anyone, for you.
Yeah, one thing that I recognized as I was, like I said, that wave of realization came over me when I was laying on the couch, and I realized how I was getting caught up. And then I saw the ego adapt so quickly, and I was like, oh, this is just what it does. It was another reminder of it's never going away. I cannot kill my ego. I don't want to kill my ego. Sometimes it annoys the fuck out of me. Sometimes Susan is so annoying. And yet I have had the experience of being in, I guess, what might be called like egoless states. And what that looks like is I'm slouched in a chair with my eyes closed, probably drooling. Like that is not something that's really sustainable in this society, right? So it's the ego isn't separate. My good friend and community member Rainer and I talk about this a lot, how there's this desire, something, I don't know, to want to separate the ego. And I'm really just talking for myself here, and, point at it like it's something evil, something bad. And it's here, right? It's me. It's part of this. It's part of this experience. And so, yeah, that really that recognition, I guess, hit deeper or whatever as I was going through that experience. And I was imagining like these side quests or ego trips, whatever you want to call it. Like right now and we talk about walking on paths, I'm talking metaphorically, but it's like I'm walking on this path now and it's not completely clear. Like there's thorns sometimes and there's mud and there's experiences that I have preferences about. But sometimes Susan will be like, look to the side and see all of this brush and thorns and be like, let's walk through there for a while. That looks fun. And so I decide to go stomping and I'm getting completely beaten up. And I convince myself like, this is fine as I'm like white knuckling this walk. And then I realize where I'm at. But then it's like I build a story about how hard it is to get back to that other path. Not that there's another path, but right, you create these stories and it's like, Susan, just blink open your eyes and you're there again. Like that's all it takes. It's a little sidestep, it's a little blink. And so that has just been kind of fun to, I guess, recognize and play with recently.
Absolutely. This is awesome because, of course, the timing of this conversation is absolutely wonderful. Andrew and I were discussing this right after our Patreon call, actually, that the experience of hell, the experience of being so lost in the confusion, is the experience of thinking that there's a journey out. Escaping it is not trying to. It's recognizing that it's self-created and just going, oh yeah, and changing it, but not making an excuse, not having a reason, just recognizing that you have the power to do so, so long as you're not caught in some narrative. And that's the trick, or rather the insight that is so difficult to come up with because we're looking for it. We're looking for the insight that sets us free. And it's the lack of looking that is freedom.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, Ray, I was just thinking how like hell, my conceptualization of hell has looked different over the years. So in part, what prompted this most recent side quest back in, I think it was January or February, I had this intense experience of, I guess, what I would call happiness. And I had not felt that since I was like 18 or 19 years old, and I'm 36, so do the math. And I was so terrified of that feeling that I built a whole story around why it was dangerous, why it was wrong for me to feel that way. And I definitely have some sadness about that, for sure. Because before 18 or 19, it had been, I think, rare that I had experienced that, whatever that was. And so, yeah, it's just interesting, right? It's like, oh, we really can build a story about anything, and create those prison walls and then stay there for however long we choose.
Instead of creating them because we can, and then letting them go when they start to create too much consequence. I mean, they can be fun. I love whatever it is we're doing here on Dualistic Unity. I have no idea what it is, no idea if it'll last, where it's going to go, what it's going to become, any of that stuff. That doesn't mean that I can't explore it, right? But does it tear me down at the end? That's all it is. Am I attached to it? Does it mean something to me? Or will I pivot? Because is it about DU or is it about me learning how to adapt and be myself? Then that's what all of it comes down to, in which case you can do anything and the winding path doesn't matter.
Yeah, it makes me wonder with those feelings when you were younger and the feeling of happiness and the following sense of it, because I've been getting a lot of like childhood memories the last week, especially a couple days ago when I took fucking 5 edibles and ran around for a little while. It was like all I was seeing was childhood stuff, like playground stuff. And there has been like, I straight up the last couple of days have felt like I've been myself for the first time in 20 years. And so those feelings coming up, a part of me wonders if any degrees of fear with that is a component of a memory of being in that spot and then learning why that wasn't okay, in a sense. Like I've been there. I was in there in that spot for a while. And then there were things that were learned, reasons to tense up. There were reasons that wasn't okay. to experience. And there were a lot of reasons. And then there were more reasons and more reasons and more reasons till you don't even remember what that feeling is like. You don't even remember how that even felt. And there were so many reasons on top of it. And so it's almost like, I don't know, this is just me spitballing, but when that feeling comes up, if it isn't anticipatory in a sense, the fear, and that's always where fear comes from, psychologically at least, is anticipatory. And so it's like, because no moments are divided, it was like that moment and all the others, that feeling and all of the others that maybe we've conceptually connected are kind of tied together, despite that not being so, despite it not being, because it's all in there. Like all the feelings are in there. And so there is no one more connected than the other, but it's, yeah, that's all I got.
I wanted to toss something in quickly because what you were saying is kind of a cycle that we go through. And what I mean is that we're always growing into new considerations of the universe or the experience that we're having, new knowledge about the world. And I say this as a parent, as somebody who's watched their daughter gradually learn more about the environment that she is a part of. And in those considerations, immediately you have a choice. Is it something you're going to be afraid of, or something you're just going to take in and adapt to? And that always comes back to your idea of yourself. And so what's interesting is that as our awareness expands, our awareness of ourself expands, we're always faced with the same choice of whether or not to have faith in ourselves or be afraid and identify. But it's always our awareness that's expanding. That's what's happening, is we're all of a sudden faced with new considerations because of how much we are. And this is something that's been interesting over the years, because of course, the spiritual crowd will tend to stick to the positive end of things, right? God is love and light and bliss and all that stuff. And anybody who's not like that is low vibration. Whereas everybody's one. Like there's no division whatsoever. And it's always just looking back at yourself. No matter who it is you're dealing with, you're looking at yourself. And so when we judge somebody for being low vibration, we're judging a part of ourselves, and we're tearing ourselves apart as a result. And so it always comes back to the same goddamn lesson, right? Relax, be yourself around everyone, right? But we always want to take in considerations and go, no, that's something to be afraid of. That's obviously not me because it doesn't match the identity that I've clung to out of fear, oddly enough. And that's why it's a vicious circle, right? Because we identify out of fear of the considerations and the fact that we can't face them. And then that reinforces that fear. And then we have more considerations because we start going down that path, but they're all fear-based considerations. None of the considerations now are considerations of how we might deal with that fear, right? We just hold on to it. This is why we hear about atrocities. It's like, well, there are pedophiles and rapists and murderers and everything else. Yeah, but they're not everywhere. The whole world isn't that. You still have to move about your day. If you go into the world thinking that everybody is the thing that you're afraid of, you're going to see everybody through a certain lens. And that's going to change how you react to them. And you end up creating the world that you're afraid of because you're divisive. It's an interesting circular loop.
No, it really does come down to faith in self. And I think going back to the retreats, that what was so helpful for me was I did not have much experience with like substances like weed or other psychedelic substances. And it wasn't the substance itself that did anything necessarily. It was, I was really scared going into those experiences, and I did it anyway. And I've been chewing on this recently. I think, and I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts on this. I think there might be, and maybe this is a story, who fucking knows, but I think there might be something different about willingly going into what I would conceptualize a hard situation versus a hard situation happening to me. Like a breakup, for example, sucks, right? Especially if you're the one being broken up with. And I'm not saying that you don't learn anything from that experience. You 100% do. You didn't necessarily choose it though, right? Where choosing to go through, maybe you're the person who's breaking up with that individual because the relationship isn't working out, or like I said, some kind of psychedelic experience, or maybe leaving a comfortable job and starting a startup. I don't know. There just seems to be something qualitatively different about that experience where you know it's hard and you're willingly stepping into it anyway, because you know at the end of the day, you're going to be okay.
That's really interesting. And as you know, this is something that I've been going through in my own life. And I think it really just comes down to the state of mind that you're going into anything. Like if you're going into any kind of relationship, or whether it's work or romantic or otherwise, and you're doing so out of need, then that's going to end up being a very difficult thing to get out of, because you're not having your needs met, right? And often what ends up happening is that you get resentful because your needs aren't being met. Then you choose to end the relationship, but it's more out of a retaliation, right? Or it's out of some need to protect yourself from something that maybe you shouldn't be afraid of, that you could deal with differently. And so going into things willingly gives you the ability to stop taking it so personally. You're not going into it because you're forced into it, or that because you feel afraid. You're going into it because you're choosing to, and because it's going to create change in your life. And that's really the most important part, is to go into it willingly, knowing that it's going to change everything, not just for you, but for the person that you're talking to. Because at least then it's got all of your attention. And that's why it is so important to choose to go into experiences, right? Is because at least then you have a degree of clarity you didn't before, because you had ideas about it, ideas about how you deal with it, ideas about everything. And that took away from the actual presence that you needed in that situation to deal with it differently, right? But if you had that presence and you weren't acting out of need, then all of a sudden you find yourself in a different situation. Different doors are open for you and the other person. And this is something that we were talking about recently, about not taking things personally. As you start to realize it's not personal, like relationships especially, right? If it's not based on need, then it's not really a result of you choosing to end the relationship so much as recognizing that the relationship is kind of ending, right? Because often it's need that gives us that desire to save the relationship, right? Which is often to pretend that we're somebody we're not, trying to maintain something out of some sense of need or fear of being alone. The alternative to that is to recognize that perhaps both you and the other person, or the organization, or whoever it is, or whatever it is you're talking about in terms of the relationship itself, perhaps there's just too much change and it's not personal. And it's in both of your best interest to just let it go.
Yeah. And I feel like it always, whether it's feeling like it's happening to you or happening as a product of you, it's your relationship with reality, right? And like your desire or willingness to let go of certainty. Like if you were in a relationship, just take the breaking up, like being broken up with versus being the breaking up or of relationship, you know what I mean? Being in the relationship and thinking that, maybe this, like I'm changing, I'm seeing shifts, I feel this draw to break up with this person, do other things, but there's this stepping into uncertainty. Like this right now is semi-certain, and without it, there isn't. And then on the flip side, you get broken up with, there's this certainty that the relationship was better. I was better off being in the relationship than not. And so it's not really about even an acceptance necessarily, but just a willingness to be uncertain about it, a willingness to let go of the certainty you were holding on to, that the situation you're currently in is better than the situation that happened or will happen. And it's like, that's the moment to moment experience from, the highest to the lowest end of the spectrum of like moment to moment, this versus that. And then it expands out to, regret. Oh, it would have been better if I had done this relative to what I did. Fear, I hope this happens. If that happens, that situation is going to be worse than the one I'm in now. And it's all certainty that those stem from. And so the willingness to be uncertain about the shifting reality, like the shifting reality that you are, the change that you are, the willingness to be uncertain about that is what allows you to face almost anything. It's the certainties that we hold on to about, even from the immediacy of my experience right now. Like, being somewhere else is better than being where I'm at now on this call. Like, that would be, I would have to hold on to a certainty for me to even look at the clock, for me to even, think, oh, when's this going to be over? And this is a terrible example because I fucking love being on these calls, but I'm saying, like, a work meeting for a shitty job that you don't like. You're looking at the clock. There's a degree of certainty that there's another experience that would be better than this because of something separate from me. It's the situation that will allow me to relax. Once I get there, then I can be happy. Then I can be relaxed. And it's all foisting of responsibility onto something else, only because I want there to be something else. Like, I just really want there to be something else. And so therefore I come up with a certainty that there is another thing, and I have an opinion of this thing. It's better or worse than the current thing I'm experiencing. So therefore, if it's worse, I'm afraid of it. If it's better, I'm hoping for it. And it's just an avoidance of the reality that it's just you here. There is no certainty about any other situation as you're moving through what is. There's no certainty whatsoever about any of the shifts. You don't know how it's going to play out, but you know that it'll be you. And so you might as well relax a little bit now. Right.
And that's the thing, is that it's not just embracing change willingly and going into the situation. It's the fact that that's more than a one-time event. That's more than a skill that you're picking up to be used from time to time. It's kind of like meditation. Each and every time you do it, you are changing the trajectory of your life. You're adding to the cumulative amount of time that you have in fact embraced change. And so you're getting better at it. And so it changes in tone as you continue to go forward. All of a sudden, you're able to make what other people would look at as a difficult decision in your life with relative ease, which doesn't mean that you don't feel all of the change that is happening in your life. It's that it isn't exacerbated by you taking it personally. It's just what it is, which means you give it all of your attention and care because you can, because you're not hurt.
Yeah, I think that's, to me at least, that's a really important point, that when you're going through hard things, it's not that like sadness isn't there anymore, or fear isn't there, anxiety. Like, you could pick up all of those things. Those are options all the time. I think I have just gotten to the point where I am sick of suffering. I have done it for decades, and that was an option. And I am recognizing that it doesn't have to be. And so while I know that I am going to continue to experience difficult things, for lack of a better words, like, I don't have to take it so seriously. I don't have to personalize it. And that is a choice. And every moment that is a choice. And it's empowering, right? That, like, I have the ability to do that.
Oh, it's the most empowering thing you can realize is just that it just comes down to you, down to, in every experience. Like, someone says something that's triggering to you, like, it's only triggering if you buy into it. And as soon as you shift, it's like fascinating. As soon as you shift, it's like, because you're the situation shifts and things look different. All of a sudden, you let go of the frustration and the certainty that was coming with that. All of a sudden, the situation isn't so much of a frustrating situation. All of a sudden, the frustrated interactions you were having weren't as frustrating. And you start to see a shift in yourself, in everyone, as you do so. And that's not it. Things become more fun, not from a controlling state by any means. It's just seeing that you're already doing all of the things happening. You're already all of the things happening. So there's no more thing to do, no thing to say to get anything else across that isn't just reinforcing that fiction that there's something else to be impacted. And then because then you bring that into any situation, and it's the most empowering thing because it's always your response. Like ultimate responsibility is the most freeing, empowering thing because you're not getting pulled around so much anymore. And it's always been that. Like you've always had that as an option. But again, something I've been realizing too is it's not the better option. It's not the only option. There's no other, all the other options aren't not as great as recognizing that, but it just comes down to you. Like, and that willingness.
Andrew, I appreciate your constant reminder of there's no right or wrong, like better or worse, because I still get tripped up on that. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So now whenever I notice frustration in myself or irritation, anger at someone else, now I'm like, okay, what is that pointing at me? Like, because there is no fucking other person. Like, it is just me. It is just my perception. So this is clearly pointing at something in myself that I have a story about, that I have a preference, a dislike, whatever it might be. And that really has just been like, right? Like, it's so funny because, yeah, this idea of it's all you, it's terrifying until it isn't. And then you're like, oh, this actually is really fun.
Yeah, then it's about acceptance. It's not about learning. It's not about trying to get somewhere. If anything, it's about the recognition that you're avoiding it. And that's when it becomes almost hauntingly obvious, to the point where I've sworn at myself for being so obvious. Like, really? That? Fuck. You know, all the time. I've said it before, but one of my favorite moments was in a mall one day thinking about my life, trying to figure out like where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do with all this, how I'm going to introduce it to the world. Can't find the store I'm looking for. I go to the mall map and it says, you are here. And I just went, fuck. Because it really just comes down to, again, understanding that you can focus on all of the optional narratives, all the optional interpretations of the experience that you're having, or you can know that they're all fucking optional. And that changes everything. All of a sudden, it's like you're working with all of the colors in the spectrum instead of being stuck to one at a time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like everything comes back on the table in a sense, because you don't, and you like actually don't need any of it to happen, not because it's the right thing to do, but just because you're in the spot that you're in and there isn't something that could add to that you could get to, because the creation of the journey itself is taking you from that spot. So like it's not even that you don't need anything, it's like you I don't even say this, like it's not that you don't need any, it's like it doesn't make sense to need anything, because as soon as the need is created, it's not that experience. Like you can't have both. Like you actually can't have the desire for something else and, you know, be relaxed, be in yourself. And so that I was, because I have been thinking about that with, you know, frustration and things. And like the last couple of days, there have been experiences where there's been like I've gotten frustrated and then but I've caught it quick and noticed that the situation kind of chills to a degree. And so that, like, looking at it's that quick that if you get frustrated and then you're like, oh, it's not that the situation, but it's pointing to something in me. Like, is that our own aversion to it just being what it is right now? Like, this frustration must mean something about, and then boom, it's like back to myself. And it's almost the catching it, but then, oh, it must mean something about me, is like the swift little avoidance to not recognizing that, oh no, it's just that right there in this moment. Can I let go of this frustration and the certainty that comes with it? And then that's it. There's not like another journey to like the frustration's pointing to something that's from that. And I have to work through that. And there's more to this.
a great point. And actually, it ties into a conversation that Susan, you and I had very briefly about power versus force. And what's interesting is that we tend to identify with whatever level in that scale of consciousness we might be at, but it has nothing to do with that. What they're really talking about are just the experiences of different levels of identity, of different types of identity, right? And so when you're feeling frustrated, the point is that you're frustrated, not what you're frustrated with, and not the you that's frustrated, right? Just the frustration itself, because that's indicative of the mentality that you're embodying.
Let me talk through this. So Andrew, going back to what you were saying. So when I say that frustration is pointing at something in me, that's a fucking story.
It's like you're creating yourself, as you say, frustration means something about me. That's you right there being created. So that saying, and I've said it before, like, and I think Alan Watts used to mention stuff like you are what you're embodying. Like frustration is like, that's just you in that, like, you are frustration, you are relaxation. It's like the attachment to that thing is all you are. That's the extent of the conceptual you in that experience. So you're actually creating it as you're thinking that it's something, as you're recognizing it. And then as soon as we think it means something, it's like, boom, whoop, story, journey, trajectory, path, something else other than me.
That's fucking wild, right? Like, there is this avoidance around, I guess, the recognition, yeah, that like I am everything, and like what that means, like the power, for lack of a better word, that comes with that. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
It's weird because there's almost this aversion to having the power to just change our reaction. It's almost like we want a narrative that justifies that we're changing, gives us a reason to believe that we can change, or gives us a reason to believe that we can't, more often than not, instead of just doing it.
We really like to have multiple steps. We really like to walk through that like thorny bush, right? It's so funny. We have become I have become addicted to suffering. I'm, I will admit that. But yeah, I'm still a little tripped up on this. I got to admit, I'm gonna, like, I guess, well, I don't know. I was gonna say I'm gonna chew on this for a while, but
hey, I hear you. I've been chewing on it for a very long time. And this is the thing about power versus force, is that unfortunately it can be twisted. It's twisted by the person who did the study, which is why the book is so hard to read, because you're like, this is really interesting stuff that they've gotten from people's body, but it's interpreted through, not gonna lie, the self-importance of the author to some degree. But it's the study that's interesting about it, because it's coming from the body, which is what experiences the mentality. They're not asking the character what they think about the mentality, right? They're talking about just the experience of the mentality. So they're asking, where is this on the spectrum for all of us? Because it's for all of us. And people tend to go, no, I'm at this level. I'm at this level. I'm at this level. It's like, when? What time of the day? When you're facing what? Talking to who? Exactly, right? Because that's it. We're the whole spectrum of mentalities, from the very lowest, from the apathetic, to the very highest, which they laughingly refer to as enlightenment. But we spend so much time caught in the gravity of identity that we don't recognize that whole scale is just a spectrum of how much you identify. And yet we identify with the scale.
And that spectrum is available to us in any moment. In any moment it's available. And I know in the past I had gotten caught on, well, once you reach that enlightenment stage or flow state, that it's just there, that you're just there forever. And then you fucking cling to that. And that's when you get caught in some weird fucking ego trip where you're saying I have positive thoughts and negative thoughts, and the negative thoughts are ego and the positive thoughts are higher self. And before you know it, months go by and you're fucking insane. So yeah, it's a weird ride.
And it's even recognizing that you're like you, the reality of you is the entirety of the spectrum playing out for eternity. So there's not even necessarily anything about the spectrum within itself that you fit within. It's like, how willing are you to be the entirety of the spectrum versus how much do you want to just be the part that you want to be, which isn't it. And so if you're already playing out the spectrum at scale as everyone, as reality, it's like it's already the experience of the entire spectrum. There isn't the weight on you to be in a certain spot. It's like those options we were talking about come back on the table. And the investment in whatever identity becomes more of it's seen as not this thing that you're forced into, but it becomes more and not even optional, because that sounds like you can be out of it, but it's like you see more options, like we were saying before, as opposed to thinking that you can only be one at a time. Like there's a weight to each experience, like, oh, I can only be this. Oh, I feel like I'm being this now, and I hope to be this. And it's like, no, it's all in there. It's all in you. It's all you all the time. So it's not really so much what you're embodying it as it is like how willing you are to be uncertain about which one you are embodying, and which one, and letting go of the idea that one is better than another, because that brings in the judgment of quote unquote other people, but also very much the judgment of yourself if you feel like one is higher or lower or better or worse.
Yeah, because the scale that we're talking about in terms of identifying is a scale of not just identification, but stress, right? The further into identity you go, the heavier it becomes. And we've spent so much time in fear, responding out of fear with identity, that we just end up being bounced right back to the bottom. And if you look at that scale of consciousness, what I think is really interesting is the progression. What they're really talking about is that there's a way the dominoes can fall. There's a trajectory that you can be going in. That's all they're really trying to say. I think the problem is that we tend to think in such a linear way that we're like, oh, I got to go up the ladder, right? And it's like, no, you can go from fear right now to reason, like that. And it's just in how much you're willing to relax. That's all it is. It's how much you're willing to let go of identity. Because what's the difference between fear and reason? Identity. This is what we were talking about earlier in terms of willingness to go into it, right? Why are you willing? Because you're not identifying with the end result. And so you have a greater capacity to reason. You are more relaxed, and that gives you different options. And so that's all we're talking about all the time, is how much you want to relax. And that's the other end of the spectrum that we don't explore because, frankly, we're afraid. And we have lots of justification to stay at that side of the spectrum, thinking that there's something better we got to get to, not realizing that that is fear derived in itself.
It's the devil that you know, right? Even though I forget what's at the bottom of that scale, but like agony and shame and guilt, it carries all of these negative connotations, and it's familiar. I mean, I lived there for a very long time. But it's so funny how I'm just thinking how I have created all of these stories in my head about this journey, right? Like, okay, I'm going to go through this really hard thing, and it's going to take months, or it's going to take me a year to get over this breakup, or I need to distance myself from this person. And it's all self-created. Like, you're right. Like that fear and reason, it's right there. There's no ladder. There's no linear. It's just all there. It's hard to put into words, but once I have recognized that, I choose to laugh at it, because the other alternative is going crazy.
Yeah, because it's just how attached are you to the story? How attached are you to the, not just, story view, but story period, story of what's happening, opinion about what's happening as truth. And so Ray and I were talking earlier just about people, coming to recognize they're not what they think, recognizing that they're everyone. And it's as if, because I was asking, like, between the scales of what you're, say, the situation that you're born into, from the most difficult, fucked up, really dark situation to the most comfortable, quote unquote, easiest situation, there's a story that comes with every scale of that spectrum. And it's that, and it's people hold on to their stories for different reasons, for different things, but really it's the attachment to experience itself to a degree, like the attachment to there being something to interact with. And so it's always that story, like how we see ourselves relative to how we see everything else. And therefore, when there's a right and a wrong that comes into play, that must come into play, as you take that duality seriously in the sense of thinking that it's all that you are. Because as soon as you think it's all that you are, you're not value itself. You're not whole and complete. Like, just you feeling separate feels incomplete. And so there's always going to be the feeling of incompletion as you're holding on to the story. So no matter what story you're holding on to, because the story in itself is incomplete, you will feel incomplete because you're seeing yourself as a fucking story. Holy shit. And so it's always that. Is without a story, there's nothing telling you that you're incomplete. Without a story, there's no idea of being something separate, a part of a whole, a fragment of a whole, a piece of the universe. Oh, God, I'm not God. God is within me. That whole thing, that it's the perception of division itself that is incomplete. It's the recognition of it's the experience of incompleteness that isn't it, so that I can have experience. But it's just that illusion. It's just that perception. But as long as you're holding on to the story, it's like the feeling of being incomplete goes hand in hand with it. And so it's always right there. But it's, I invest a lot into that story.
It's interesting, right? Like, duality is something that is hard baked into our experience. It's the root of that experience. But then we take that duality and we create a conceptual duality on top of the experience of duality, because we're already experiencing the duality of quote unquote time. There's a before and an after. And we're experiencing the duality of quote unquote division. There's you and there's me, right? But then I give you a fucking story. Then I give me a story. And that story is immediately within more duality. Now there's a good and there's an evil. Right now, there's different, agendas, and where are you trying to get? And then you would believe that shit, and you actually have your own agendas. Now I'm justified in my stories, right? And that's the thing, is we get so caught up in it that we've developed generations of stories justified upon other stories, justified upon other stories, until finally the biggest story is that life is one. And that's the insight, is that we're narrating something instead of actually being in it. And what's worse, if you listen to the narration, if you listen to the common discussion, it's getting worse. Like, the narration, if you were to listen to it, is things are turning really shitty for everybody because they are not focusing on anything, and everybody's feeling really divided and alone. And that's the narration. I mean, you could have it done by Morgan Freeman, but that's what it would sound like regardless, because that's what we're doing. We're actually telling ourselves that all the time. Right? That we're divided from one another, that there's, a problem with racism, there's a problem with environmentalism, problem with corrupt government, problem with all of this stuff, instead of just doing something about it, which we let go of the story that divides us to begin with, that created the government the way it is, created and perpetuates racism the way it is, and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting, Ray, to hear you say how, like, that's the narration now. And I don't know if it's because I, like, completely do not watch the news anymore, and just the other people, whatever, that I have surrounded myself with. Like, I don't know. I can understand you saying that's what the narration is, but I would say, and maybe this is just a reflection of my mindset, I don't know if I want to say it feels like it's changing, but like the division is there, but it doesn't feel as scary, if that makes any sense.
You're not taking the narration so seriously, which is exactly what you're saying, which is changing the story. That's all this is we're so caught up in the narrative of our own individual lives that we have a collective narrative that is increasingly shitty. We actually have a doomsday clock. How fucked is that? And it's not an actual clock. It doesn't measure anything. It's totally subjective.
Because I feel like some days when or like when I've been going through shit and then feeling more relaxed, like I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm talking and like there's a discounting to experience itself in a sense, like the recognition that society is just a reflection of you, but not the you that you think. And so I don't know, sometimes I get caught in you being like me being me, because there's still an idea there to a sense with everything being a reflection of me. And it's because you said, Susan, like as you've shifted, the way you're seeing things have shifted. And that's exactly how it tends to play out, in the sense of you shifting. So you are shifting, but sometimes I feel like I conceptualize a mass shift and over not overestimate the influence of certain shifts, but I don't know, I might be overthinking this one a little bit, that with society itself just being you, I guess there's still that, yeah, there's still a discussion to be had, but just like how much sways by you doing it yourself or recognizing it yourself. Because like, who am I talking about, right? Like, who am I talking about? That's not all of it.
This is the tricky part, and this is where a lot of people get caught, in my opinion. Is you start to recognize that you are not the character that you identify with. You're not who you think you are. You're not what you think you are. You just are. And then immediately we feel that cessation of worry and concern on the character level, right? But then it almost becomes a disconnect from the experience. Like it's almost easy to disconnect from other people and the experiences that's happening in the world, because you're not so connected to your own character. You actually start to feel like, I'm invincible. If I died, who gives a shit, right? And you say that until somebody's chasing you with a knife and you're like, holy fuck, right? And that's the point, is that you have to keep that realism even as you recognize you're not what you think you are. And as you let go of what you think you are and you let go of the division that goes with that, are you recognizing that everything around you has the same connection and thus requires the same care and consideration as your skin itself? Because the world is your flesh. All of this is you. It's not the you identify with. Can you maintain that self-care once you've let go of the idea of yourself? Because if you were only caring for the idea, then that's not really self-care.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I definitely had noticed starting to get caught up on, I don't know if I would say that I was invincible, but almost like it doesn't matter what you do, you can be reckless, whatever. And then noticing the thought like, well, be careful with that. It's interesting because I would say that I never really had a positive self-image or like a positive ego. It always tended to go to the side of like, you're stupid, you're worthless, blah, 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 you don't deserve anything. And it's funny because as my mindset has shifted, I've noticed thoughts of like more positivity and then me judging that, right? Like, don't go there. Like, that's going to be a scary place too. So yeah, that's just been interesting. But you're speaking to empathy, right, Ray? Like true empathy. And yeah, I have, I guess, like recognized that more as I'm just like out and about going about my day. I live in a smaller city, but a city nonetheless. And there's, I guess, like a sizable homeless population. There's like a little food pantry, for lack of a better word, like right across the street from me. And so I watch people come and go and grab food. And it's just been interesting observing my, oh gosh, it's really hard to put this into words, but just my feelings towards different people and different things that I'm observing as my mindset has shifted. I think maybe you've described it as almost like an open nerve. And I think resonate with that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's interesting because we face those feelings and immediately we think, oh my God, I need to solve this. Like when we feel sorry for someone, we're just like, Jesus, that's got to be hard. I need to fix that. And it's like, what makes you think that you're needed in this in any way, shape, or form? Like, what makes you think that contributing differently to the entire environment isn't enough? Right? Because that changes it for everyone, but we don't do that. Instead, we're like, I got to go give them $5. It's like, how about just don't be such a douchebag, right? Don't be so greedy. Don't be looking for that raise each and every year. Don't become a landlord where you own 5 houses and people have to pay increasingly more rent because the market is flooded with landlords. Like, don't contribute to the system that's creating the homelessness to begin with. Change yourself, right? And that changes everything. But instead, we run from the feeling, we try and find that quick solution instead of going, wow, this is indicative of what I'm doing collectively. This is indicative of something that's happening within me. I'm having that experience. And it's not to say it's good or bad or wrong or anything else, but it's certainly something that could be addressed if we were to let go of the divisiveness that drives it. Right. And that's it. It's just the awareness of it. And isn't it funny that the only way to increase our awareness is to go through the feeling? But we immediately go, I don't like that feeling. And we think about ourselves and we try and get rid of it.
Yeah, and there's a balance as always in the prioritization, right? Of yourself versus, yourself. And oh fuck, it's crazy how we can see things and like still maintain a conceptual idea of ourself, like still see other people and your influence on them stemming from you, but seeing as them as opposed to an equated experience between yourself and everything else. And like with everything, it is a balance. It is because you are equally a component of that, but it's a scale always, and it's finding out where those lines are. Because like if you're doing everything for everyone else, wither away, you don't even stop to feed yourself, then you're not so much use. But it's a balance. And if it's all you and there isn't as much consideration, then that's neglecting another component that is equally you. And damn, it's like fucking, yeah, there's fucking nothing to settle on. God damn it.
No, but it is really, really interesting that we will want to deal with the things that we don't resonate with. Like we'll want to deal with homelessness, for example. And yet we won't question the structure that we work for. We won't question the career that we've chosen. We won't question the field that we've decided to study. We won't look at how it might be corrupted because that's something we want to do. Right. But when we see something doing something that we couldn't imagine ourselves wanting to do, we're like, that needs to be fixed. This is why I love the whole, stop looking at the speck in someone else's eye, look at the beam in yours. Because we blind ourselves all the time. All the time. This is why it became increasingly difficult for me to work a sales job for a very long time, was because I recognized that I was selling shit for the sake of selling shit. And people were buying shit for the sake of buying shit. And there was no actual value that was being passed around at all. There was no value in the discussion. There was no value in the product. There was no value in the brief moment of satisfaction that came from getting paid for that or from them buying it. And so after a while, you're just like, oh, and you stop doing it because you recognize, based on the work you've done on yourself, that something can change, that in itself is not enough of a reason to do it. Right. And so the same is true with us collectively. It's just that we're so caught up looking at the benefit of what we're doing that we don't want to look at the cost of what we're doing to the rest of us. because we identify with the small part. Not in my backyard. It's like, it's all your backyard. You are the backyard.
Oh yeah, right. As you were talking, I was just thinking about like my own field of psychology and just how fucked up that field is, and how I contributed to the fucked upness, and I'm sure I still am, even to this day. But right, just pathologizing the human experience is really what psychology does. It sounds insane to say that, but that's really what it's become, right? Like you have this experience of your heart racing and maybe feeling tightness in your chest. Let's slap a label of anxiety on that. Let's call that wrong. You shouldn't feel that way. Here's some pills. Go see a therapist for $200 an hour. Might have to see him for 10 sessions, maybe 10 years, who knows, and good luck to you. So yeah, it's been interesting just reflecting on that in my own field, and the pushback from the field itself, and I think just kind of where we're at as a mentality. But I will say it has been, as I'm taking things less seriously, it has become a little bit more fun, almost being like a Trojan horse, if you will. Now I, in this mindset, and I recognize I'm not trying to get my patients anywhere. They're going to hear what they're going to hear, right? But it's like I'll drop the seeds I can, and you'll take from it what you can.
And what's nice is you start to recognize, because it's not the words, because it's not choosing any one option you think is the right option. It really is just sitting in the potential of each and every moment. That means it's just about you being there. That's all it's about. And we keep trying to think like, well, what's the right thing to say? How do I counsel correctly? How do I, engage in a relationship correctly? And all of that is creating this superficial layer that is actually distorting from what could be happening otherwise. Just show up, and the rest will take care of itself, so long as you are caring for that moment because it's you. Isn't it funny that we'll care for our body, but not recognize that we're not just the body, that we are the whole moment that we are experiencing? That is what we're supposed to care for. And so this is something that I've really enjoyed about the retreats. And you can attest to this because you've been to them. I'm not trying to help anyone. I'm not trying to get anyone anywhere. If anything, we're just having this conversation based on wherever it is they're at and what they're willing to let go of. And so the best thing I can do is just be there as an exposed nerve, right? And relax through it so they can see that they can do that too, to whatever capacity they're willing.
I love this. It's like we've come full circle, right? We started the conversation talking about how it's not the words, it's the embodiment. And that is really something, at least in my own career, that I have recognized, that it doesn't matter what the fuck I say, even though our field now has these literally like session by session, word by word manuals. Like I could open up a manual and read from it, and that is supposed to be therapy. It's insane. But right, I just recognize it's my presence or whatever in the room. That's what I can give. Like you said, it's the embodiment of it. And it's just been really interesting to see that play out.
Yeah, that potential for influence in some of the most egotistical places is heightened in a sense, right? Like the Trojan horse analogy. I love that because that's what it is. It's because the current, mentality that or the current situation with counseling is a product of given mentality. And so if it's not the action itself, it's not interacting with someone that's the issue. It's not the structure that's the issue. It's the mentality behind it. And so if you're recognizing that mentality, you can utilize that position in a way that's equally utilizable in any other situation. And oftentimes the most egotistical sort of typical dynamics are the most potential because it's someone in a vulnerable state, in a spot where they're going through changes. They're almost looking for a shift. And then instead of, sitting in that spot, we direct them. We're like, okay, it wasn't that way, it's this way. And it's like, this was wrong, and now you're right, sort of, instead of just, there's nothing wrong. And so I know that you've mentioned in the past that you're practice is, or at least your mentality is shifted with with all of this. And so I would argue that there's nothing to be concerned about, buying into a certain type thing, because it just comes down to your mentality. And so it's like the situation isn't quite as relevant, and the potential is always there, that potential for influence. And so it's amazing that despite going through the years of those thick ass books with all the words and the right things, that now you're in a spot where you can see it a little bit differently.
It dawns on me that where you are situated, considering your mentality, is so perfect for so many reasons. But the biggest reason is that the end of the spectrum that you have to be at to look for help from somebody who has a certain certificate from a structure that promises to have the answers. That's awesome if you think about it, because you're talking to them and you're saying, yeah, well, they're in you too. And did you ever consider moment to moment, you're learning from people all the time because you're learning about yourself? And so you're actually chipping away at the very belief that somebody with a very specialized field of study must be addressed. That person must be gone to for an answer. And you're going, no, it's kind of in everything around you, and thus in you, right? Because isn't it interesting? How divided do we have to be to think other human beings wouldn't understand what it is to experience being a human being, that we actually have to go to a professional human being in order to have them understand our emotions? They have to have gone to a school with other educated special human beings to understand what it is to be human. And everybody's going through this. And so we must be so divided to look for that person who is a specialist in being something that we're all experiencing.
That fucking hit. Yeah, I had not thought about it quite like that before. Yeah, that's something. I will say, like as you were talking, I was thinking how I would say over the past year or so, that is one thing that my clients have said to me. They're like, we know you're not trying to get us to stay. Like, you are trying to get us out of here as soon as possible. It's like, yeah, like the work isn't talking to me. It's doing hard things. Like, that's really what the work is. Like, that's the most simple way I can say it. It's just go do things that you're scared of and you'll be okay. Yeah.
That's incredible. And again, like, the search for that professional, the search for that specialist is an act of fear. So you're helping undermine that just in chipping away at their belief in even you being the solution to the problem. They're left with no other options. That's the funny part about this, is that we're not telling people to believe in something. We're saying get rid of all of those. And what you're left with is what you're looking for.
Yeah, go prove that you're wrong, right? Over and over and over and over until you stop thinking that there's a right, and just keep doing that. And when the right thing comes up, go question that, wonder about that. Because that's all, like, that's what it is. People come into situations like that looking for counselor, looking for coaching, thinking they're correct about something, thinking they're actually 100% correct about a way that they're seeing something. And based on that assumption, not that it's something that's happening, but their opinion of how it's happening is then bought into by this expression of them, overarching expression of them, that has bought into the idea that there is an overarching right and wrong, that there is a normal and an abnormal, that there is a disorder and an order, or an order and a disorder. Like, and as we buy into that, we buy into it ourselves. And then we see that someone sees that and they're like, oh yeah, that fits my idea of that, the idea that we've created and scaled out. And so then, this is the response to that, as opposed to just recognizing that it's like the inherent uncertainty. That's what all of this comes back to, is just that you don't know. You think you're correct about that thing, but maybe you're not. And even just that question, I can hear the response, oh, no, well, maybe I am. It's like, yeah, but maybe you're not. And it's the unwillingness to look at that that's like cognitive dissonance, basically, is where it comes from, is that it's like, maybe it's not, but yeah, you don't know that it is ever.
I always love the argument. Well, maybe I am certain. It's like, of which part and for how long? Because that's it. Like, you seem to be believing in something that does not withstand scrutiny. Let's just say that, because there is no certainty. There is no certainty. And somebody, well, I'm certain the sun will be there for how long? Right? There's no certainty.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my clients come in because they don't like how they're feeling, right? They have this experience in their body or maybe in their mind. They're creating a story about it. And they're like, I don't like this. I've called this thing anxiety and I don't like it. And it's like, well, like it's happening, right? This is the experience that's happening right now. That's often what I say. So it's like, it doesn't really matter if you like it or not. And in fact, you creating this whole story around it is likely what's perpetuating it. So maybe we can just like say, this is what it is and like keep on chugging along. And yeah, a lot of clients initially don't like that, but then they're like, oh, but you know, she's kind of got a point. Like it's here, whether I'm fighting it or not.
But that's it. They're coming to you with an idea of what this is and what the journey is going to be and how they're going to solve this problem. And you're going, that's not what this is about. Sit down, get comfortable. Let's get to know each other because we're just here to talk while you work through things. And by the way, I go through shit too. And isn't it interesting? Because all you're being really given now in the industry that you're in is an opportunity to have an office to sit with people and have a heart to heart. And isn't that amazing? Because so many people would use it for a different intention. And even in that conversation, the fact that you have nothing you're trying to convince them of. You're not trying to say it's this disorder. You're not trying to say, it's this product of this modality that we have to go into. You need to use this therapy. You need to use this idea and this strategy. You're not doing any of that. You're just like, let's just unwind. Let's just let this unwind and find how we're responsible and not judge ourselves for it. There's nothing more human than that. And I love the fact that that is a Trojan horse, because how fucked is society that has to actually exist underneath the radar? Because you know as well as I do that people in your industry would be immediately suspicious. What do you mean you're just being human?
Yeah, it's so funny. I've had thoughts recently, like, I can't believe I get paid for this. Like, I'm just having a conversation with another person. That's literally all I'm doing, and I'm getting paid for this. This is fucking wild. You were saying, Ray, how like it's just about being yourself and also like some self-disclosure. Like, shocking, I get anxious too, or I have a story about anxiety or fear. And when I was in school, I was taught, like, never do that, never self-disclose. Like, you are wearing the therapist Susan hat, and that's a completely different person than non-therapist Susan. And so it's just been really fun to like break down those walls and just be my genuine self. And like, I'm not perfect, and I will openly, almost joyously share that with clients because they're like, oh, you go through this too? And it's like, yeah, all the time. I cry all the time. Not all the time, but
Yeah, it's like we're pushed to maintain this structure that only reinforces their structure. But the structure is the maintenance of the structure. And so we're just, my structure that I'm reinforcing is reinforcing structure itself, like structure as above, so below. And so, of course, a system, a mentality that's trying to maintain itself is going to push back against a structureless approach when it's structure itself. Like, if components of the structure don't have so much structure or don't feel a need for the control and the certainty of having structure, the structure starts to come apart. The structure starts to topple. Maybe a couple chips away here and there can maintain, but it can't maintain for long. And it's just structure itself. Like, my structure of me is reinforcing structure itself. And so those interactions, it totally makes sense why they want you going in maintaining therapist Susan, because then the person coming in maintains structure me, and then they're something wrong with that structure inherently. And so there's something to sell it and something to make it feel like it's a little bit less incomplete, as opposed to just, going in without a structure is allowing for them to realize that they don't need that structure, maybe so much.
And what's worse is that it's not even necessarily about Susan or the therapist saving face, about appearing a certain way, but all therapists, the industry as a whole, maintaining a certain face in front of the public that we know, right? Because otherwise, why would people go to a therapist? And this is what we got all through the 80s and the 90s as it became more and more popular, going into the 2000s and whatnot. It was just more and more like, yeah, well, you got a problem? You seeing a therapist? You got a problem? You seeing a therapist? Movies, television shows. You got a problem? You're seeing a therapist. I'm seeing a therapist now. Like, it's just over and over and over again, as opposed to. So I was chatting with a good friend of mine the other day, and I had a moment of self-honesty. And in that moment of self-honesty, I decided I want to do something else. Don't need a reason necessarily. I just recognized something, and it was really good, just good to have somebody I could chat with for a little while and really just let things out in a non-judgmental way. Holy fucking shit. What? You didn't pay for that? Like that. And it's just that we have this idea again of this specialized human who knows specialized things. And those specialized things are going to save you from yourself. And yet the real message is that I'm just working on my shit. I'm doing the best I can to not have so much conflict in myself. And as a result of that, I can tell you, in all honesty, you can do this too. It's not about knowing anything in particular so much as understanding that you can do this, that you have the ability, that the story you're telling yourself isn't the case. So all of a sudden, it's not about therapy. It's about you embodying your own lessons, not convincing anyone of anything, and then just showing up and allowing them to use what they can. And that's it. Just embody it.
As you were talking, I was just thinking, like, this is, I guess, kind of what dualistic unity is to me, this community. It's this space where I can rant for 2 seconds, I can rant for 10 minutes, and no one's judging me. If they are, they're just judging themselves. And yeah, it's, I think so often we have interactions with people and you kind of know when someone is being really present or not, when they're there or not, or when they're so caught up in their mind, their thoughts, or what they want to say next. And so, yeah, it is, I think, a really beautiful thing to have that space where you're just there with, other people who are just interested and just willing to hear what you have to say. I just think that's a really beautiful thing.
Especially considering you're willing to listen to them. Because it's not about necessarily what they're saying so much as what you're willing to get out of it, how open you're willing to be, how much you're willing to let go of the optional perspective that you've been holding on to see the optional perspective that they're holding on to. And then in that, see how optional they are. All right. There's so much to be learned in just not taking ourselves so seriously and embodying that state of uncertainty without immediately panicking.
Yeah, there's nothing to yet. There's no one to convince. So on our calls, of course, it's not going anywhere. We're just sitting in it, being it, and it's just doing that. Like, that makes sense when you're not trying to get to a certain spot, have a certain agenda. As soon as an agenda comes in, it's like there is the certainty that if the agenda is fulfilled, then be better. Like, this is a better experience than whatever would play out sans agenda, without agenda. And it's like, just want to know. I want to know that I'll be okay if this plays out in a certain way, as opposed to just being okay. Just being okay. It's not an if, it's not a when, it's not a as long as, it's just it. Like, not good, not perfect, not bad, just it. Just being, can you be it right now? And continue. interacting with yourself without a need for something else to change you, as if you're not change itself, just playing out.
So, Susan, I wanted to mention, because we do have to wrap up this episode in a short bit here. It has been such a pleasure to know you since you joined the community and to watch your trajectory as you've just felt more at ease being yourself and understanding that you are the message. You are the point. What you are doing whenever you are in the moment with anyone is the best thing that you can do for them and for you. And it has been a pleasure to watch that. I really appreciate you being on the episode today. I wanted to share with our audience that, of course, they're likely aware of the trajectory of dualistic unity and some of the things that we have in mind in terms of our lofty ambitions. We don't know how as yet, but Susan has agreed that she will be working with us as we expand. We don't know in what capacity, but we do know that we're going to be able to facilitate more interactions with Susan, and we're going to be able to give her more of a chance to share everything that she has learned to embody. And so I just want to say on my side, Susan, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your friendship.
Thank you both for your friendships as well. Yeah, you mean the world to me.
As do you to me. It's I always love chatting with you, Susan. You're always on it, and it's just fun going back and forth with someone who's willing to be uncertain. That's really it's so much fun talking with people who are willing to be uncertain, willing to question not just reality but themselves. Same thing, but you know what I mean? That it's awesome to see what comes of that. And so it's all you ever got to do. Show up willing to be uncertain. Just talking to myself, but I appreciate you, and I'm really glad we were able to make this episode happen.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This has been a blast.
Hell yeah. I look forward to the next time that you can join us. For anybody who is still with us, thank you for being here. I'm glad that you could join this fucking epic conversation. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.